Here's what I want to do this morning. I want to talk very briefly, maybe, about unity. And this is something that's really important to me. Christianity, right? It's not about just a belief in God. Just a general, I believe that there is this God. I believe that there's this thing out there, and we should be good, and we should be nice to each other. And you can go ahead and flip that lighter. I'm good with that. And we should be nice to each other. And then there's this Jesus, and he showed us how to be nice to each other. Christianity is not just about that. If you're a follower of Christ, it's actually about you being united with Jesus in and through his Spirit to do the work of God on this earth and then beyond. There's some stuff about beyond too. And I think that's really important, because really what I'm saying as I say that is this. If you're a follower of Christ, and this morning I want to do something very specific. I want to talk specifically to you who are followers of Christ. Now that may not be all of you, but it might be most of you, I'm going to assume. And so if you're not a follower of Christ, this is awesome. Just kind of check in and feel free to talk to me afterwards and say, I didn't agree with this or whatever. That's cool. So I'm specifically going to talk to those who are followers of Christ, okay? Now, the thing about this is, if you have a relationship with Jesus, you belong to God. Say that again, because this is really, really important. We have to get this. You belong to God. Now, here's why that's important. We're talking about this series about I Love the Church. I love Fellowship Church. I love what we're doing. I love what God is doing through us and through our families in different areas. And I love it, man. Just all sorts of things I love. And I swear to you, I'm not just saying that because, I got to. I don't have to. People don't always have to. But I really love it. But one of the things I think we need to work on, and the body of Christ needs to work on, is loving the church as a whole. That there is some connection that we have, that this church has. And it's not, we couldn't say it, there's no denominational affiliation with every church I've ever been a part of, which is one, I think, or two maybe, in the Midwest. Like, we have an affiliation with churches that are growing and starting in Korea. And we can't really see that connection. Like, there's people and followers of Christ we're not going to see. But it's so important that we understand this unity. It's so important that we understand that we are called to love those people in different counties, in different states, in different countries, in the entire world. We're called to love those people. So today, what I want to do, I want to take that little verse in John 17 that we talked about last week. I and you, Jesus said, about God as he was praying. I in you, and them, meaning all of us, in me, that they may be brought to complete unity. Okay? I want to take that little verse and I want to talk about a different area that might help us as a church, fellowship church, to love the church. The first one was love. Love helps us to be unified. This other area helps us to be unified even more. And we'll call it this morning holiness. Holiness. You could call it perfection. You could call it life change in different ways. You could call it to be set apart, which we'll talk about a lot. But holiness. And how important holiness is to unity. This is really an awesome, popular topic too, so I'm pumped about it. Okay, that was one of my best jokes of the day. Okay, I had that going so much different. Jesus said this. Actually, God said this all over the place in the Bible. Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now, what he was saying there was not, I want you to stay away from alcohol. I want you to watch no more than 1.2 hours of TV. I want you to do this and this and this and this bullet point and this bullet. He wasn't saying any of that. Here's what he's saying. I want you to be set apart or perfect. Like I am perfect. Like I am set apart. Well, that sounds really steep, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds really, really intense. How in the world are we going to do that? I'm glad you asked. You didn't really ask, but you see what I did there? It was great. Wow, man. Okay, how many, I'll get you guys going here. How many of you love the Boston Red Sox? Never mind, we see the pack of that. It's been good. Hey, band, you there? How many of you love the Boston Red Sox? They are world champions, right? Okay. I love the Red Sox. Okay, I don't like baseball, but I'm gonna get on the bandwagon. I love the Red Sox, and I love sports too, right? I love all kinds of sports. But specifically, right now is a great time to use this as an illustration. The Red Sox are world champions. So what do you say? Oh, I love the Red Sox. Oh, I bleed, Red Sox Nation. That's a little weird, but whatever. I love them. That's what we say. I want to go see a game. I'm just excited. So many of us who didn't even ever watch the game during the regular season, during the World Series, we'd be like, hey, let's stay up until awful hours so I can be tired tomorrow morning, because the rest of the Red Sox Nation, this is what my wife did. She's like, hey, let's watch the Red Sox play. I was like, huh? She's like, yeah, this would be great. I'm like, I agree. I just didn't think you would think that would be great. She's like, no, let's watch it. So we watched the World Series. I gotta tell you, that's like miracle stuff. Right? My wife doesn't watch sports. That's like eye-opening. So what the Red Sox do, what other teams do, is you say that I love them. I love them. They are, you can say it this way. I am part of the Red Sox Nation. Right? That's what they say. I'm part of the Red Sox Nation. So in a sense, we belong to the Red Sox. Now, the early Christian writers, the early follower of Christ, they had this idea that they belonged to God. And in their belonging, because they belonged to God, He loved them so much. And so consequently, what would happen is, that would affect their behavior, because they understood that love. And because they understood what that love was all about. And so they grabbed onto that love, and it affected their behavior, and that made them work at this idea of holiness, of being set apart. And God's love was central to the idea that they were becoming holy. In fact, there was this guy named John, who a lot of times is referred to as John the Beloved. And John would write letters to different friends and different people who were followers of Christ. And one of these letters is in the Bible. Several of these letters is in the Bible. But this particular letter, in 1 John chapter 4, verse 11, this is what John says. He says, "Dear friends, since God loved us that much, we surely ought to love each other. No one has ever seen God, but if we love each other, God lives in us, and His love is brought to full expression in us." I love this phrase. His love is brought to full expression. In other words, when you love a team, right? There's a couple ways to do this. You can say, "I love the team." You can wear Red Sox stuff. Anybody have any sports outfits on now today? Anybody at all? You have a hat? Yeah, okay, cool. So that's an expression of your love for your team. Well, John says an expression of your love for God is you loving one another, okay? Then he says this, "And God has given us His Spirit as proof that we live in Him and He in us. Furthermore, we have seen with our own eyes and now testify that the Father sent His Son to be the Savior of the world. All who confess that Jesus is the Son of God have God living in them, and they live in God. We know how much God loves us, and we have put our trust in His love. God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them." Three things that we see from this passage. First of all, that God is love. That when you talk about love, God is the very embodiment of love. Okay? The second thing we learn from this passage is that all who live in love live in God. That's a different way of saying the first thing. And then thirdly, and this is really important, specifically to those of you, and I know I say this talk, to those of you who don't have a relationship with Christ, this is a great kind of story of thinking and how to progress toward that. All who confess that Jesus is the Son of God have God living in them. That there's a confession there that one makes. If you say, "I'm on God's team, I belong to God," this confession is Jesus is the Son of God. Okay? And as we live in God, our love grows more perfect. Isn't that beautiful? Now think about this. As you live in God. Now, here's what this is saying. This is all this is saying. Your behavior is affected by who you belong to. You know this is true, right? In other words, when you feel that you belong to something, your behavior will follow along. I'll give you an example. I came here 15 years ago. I've always felt at home like I belonged here, right? There are different places. I've been talking a lot the last week with people who are introverts and extroverts, kind of discussing this. I'm an introvert, in case you didn't know. And part of this discussion is so great because introverts and extroverts belong, and the way you feel like you belong is different, right? There are different ways to feel like you belong. But if you feel you belong somewhere, your behavior follows along. So what John is saying here is, as we live in God, as you understand that you belong to God, your behavior begins to line up. Your love, if God is love, your love grows more perfect. Okay? So we will not be afraid on the day of judgment, but we can face him with confidence because we live like Jesus here in this world. Scripture all over the place talks about, and sometimes it's different, days of judgment, right? And the day of judgment is, many times, this day of judgment refers to something, a judgment based on what you've done, things that you've done. Not always, but some of them are a judgment based on what you've done, okay? Now, here's the thing about that. Holiness and the things that you do and the way that you live and the way that you act, right? It matters, but it's got a bad rap. And the reason it's got a bad rap, because a lot of people who stand up on a church, sometimes on a Sunday, sometimes on a Saturday, sometimes other days of the week, stand up and talk about things that you have to do to be holy. And so they write things out sometimes. Or sometimes it's if you're in a particular church or whatever, it's known. Have you ever been there? Like you know what you're going to do a movie. Is that alcohol in that cup? What? What? Are you dancing? Are you playing cards? Trust me. For now, I'm going to admit that happens, right? So here's the thing. People stand up and they write out things that make you holy, and they focus on that instead of why, in the first place, you would want to be holy. And John says that the reason that you would want to be holy is because you are God's. Come on, us. Let you think about that for a second. Not that you're God's, but you are possessed by God. That God lives in you. My parents were super strict. I didn't go to a movie until I was 17, and it was Aladdin. Don't you dare close your eyes. I mean, it was beautiful. But the thing about this, right, is I appreciated their rules because in the midst of enforcing them, and eventually they let go, and that was nice, they constantly reinforced, you are our son, and we love you. I gotta tell you, that's way different than you are our son, and you have to act the way a Holman should act. That goes well. Right? That's, I am someone's child. And consequently, they love me. And I long to be like them. I long to be the way a Holman would act. Because that love is so great. Such love has no fear. Because perfect love, or the love that God gives, we belong to Him, expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment, and this shows that we have not fully experienced His perfect love. I gotta tell you, nothing you do for God and for His church has to be out of guilt. Man, it should be out of belonging. It should be out of the sense that I belong. Because God's love is so great for me. Because I understand that God's love, and consequently the people around me, hopefully, love me so much that I want to take a step toward this idea of holiness. I'm going one way. And I'm living a way, and I know it's wrong. But consequently, I want to change that because the love that I've experienced in God is so monstrously great. Because strict rules don't make holiness. Love does. God's love leads us to holiness. We love each other, verse 19 says, because He loved us So how does this teaching help us to be holy? I'm going to give you a list of rules real quick. Just kidding. I have a question. Once again, going back to sports, right? When do you feel like you're not so into your team, if you're a sports fan? When do you feel like, I can take it or leave it? When you're losing. When you feel like you're not winning. This is the appropriate time for me to bring up that I'm a Steelers fan. Don't judge me. It's not about judgment. This is about love. The thing about being a Steelers fan right now is it's not about winning. So I'm kind of there, but I got to tell you, this year, I'm taking it or leaving it. Right? I'm at love. I'm on wave the terrible towel quietly underneath the table. But it's different than when they're winning. And the problem is, when we belong to God, there are times that we don't feel like He's winning. There are times where all of a sudden life gets really big and circumstances take over and we feel like kind of the disciples in the boat. That really just happened. And we just go back and forth. And we don't feel like Jesus can do anything in the process. We don't feel like God can step down and get in and win the thing, even though He sent His Son. And by the way, in the process of sending His Son, He conquered sin and death, Scripture says, through resurrection from the dead. And we believe that, but all of a sudden we don't feel like we're winning on a winning team. So all of a sudden there are other winning teams that seem like, that may be better. The winning team of lust. If I just got in this relationship, it would make everything better. The winning team of money. And I'm not saying money's bad. But then when we long for it, we think it's going to solve all our problems. And selfishness and greed creeps in. The winning team seems like, oh, that's it. That's great. The winning team of intellectualism. If I just know enough, everything will be better in my life. The winning team of entertainment. I just got to watch one more, a little bit more. It's going to fulfill me eventually. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And I choose winning team after winning team after winning team that I think are winning. But the problem is, they don't. But when you are keenly aware that you belong to God, that you are united with Jesus in and through His Spirit to unleash the power of love and bring His kingdom to this earth. And that's your game. It's not so much a chore, but it becomes a calling. Have you ever felt called to do something more than you're doing? It becomes a calling, something you're passionate about. One call for holiness that the Jewish people used to have, still have, but they have for millennia would say. They would have a tradition. And they would say to their fellow teammates, their fellow Jewish people, they would, and they do say things like, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. And if you break that down, Shabbat means, it literally means to stop or to cease. But it also has a root in there for the word Sheva, or seven. Shalom, of course, we know this as peace. But literally it means to make restitution. Or to make whole. So when a Jewish brother and sister say to another Jewish brother and sister, Shabbat Shalom, what they're saying is, may you become whole. Or may your wholeness be restored as you cease work on the Sabbath. The Sabbath. A lot of interesting ideas about the Sabbath. But probably the right idea of the Sabbath is this. The Sabbath is a day that we give back to God. That we dedicate to God in time. Much like we dedicate to God tithe, right? But we give back. God, this is yours. This time is yours. And the purpose of it is because you can't just go and go and go and go and go and expect to be healthy. You have to stop. And God says in Exodus chapter 3, in 20 rather, remember the Sabbath to keep it what? Holy. Or set apart. He says, you work for 6 days, but you have to remember your intuition is going to think, if I work this 7th day, everything's going to be better. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be awesome. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to get more stuff. I'm going to do this. No. God says. Your very holiness or set apartness depends on you being able to dedicate to me back to what already belongs to me. Shabbat Shalom. May you become whole, or may your wholeness be restored as you cease. Your wholeness. So Sabbath provides a wholeness for you to be restored. You say, well, wait, that just means I kind of sit in a hole and nothing. No. The Jewish people, this was their holiest of times, but it wasn't holy like we consider holy. No, it wasn't like that. Men and women would gather in the streets, they would link arms, and they would do those dances. Have you ever done those dances? I haven't, clearly. But they would dance. Community would turn into a place of mystery, of wonder, and of glory as families would welcome in the Sabbath. I wonder if just maybe, as a people, we have scheduled ourselves because we think, oh, our kids just got to do this. Their whole lives would be great. Oh, you know what? If I just did this and this and this, and I could just not say no to anyone, said no one ever, my life would be wonderful. But here's what we do, and this is fascinating. What we do in the process is, we realize we've done too much, and we say, the first thing that goes, church. Well, you don't need to be a Christian to go to church. Something like that. You don't need to go to church. You don't need to go to church to be a Christian. I know. Isn't that awesome? But the question is this. Is that day, meaning 24-hour period, going back to God? Dedicated to God with your brothers and sisters in unity. The off-season, right? Every sport needs an off-season. Why? Is it because the players are tired? No. Don't kid yourself. If the players could keep going, they would make more money off you. Being honest. The off-season is important. They need it not just for the players, but for the fans. Greg Easterbrook says this, he's a sports writer. He argues that sports cannot maintain their popularity if they don't have the appropriate amount of off-season. Why? The human mind will get oversaturated and get bored and get tired of it. really, really quickly. So a couple of years ago, the NFL, the most powerful, popular sport league, was thinking of going to 18 weeks. They cut the talks. Why? And they might someday do it again. But why? Oh, because we don't want our players to get hurt. No. Because it would hurt the popularity of the sport. We can only take so much. Why? That's how God created us. He created us to stop. And I think part of the reason why our churches, part of the reason why me, why sometimes we're having trouble with holiness, is because we haven't learned to take Sabbath. To take what God has done for us and celebrate it in a day of rest. Now, there are those of us here in this room, right, that don't feel like you belong. I know that. But I want you to know something. This is what I know more than anything. Extrovert, introvert, whatever. You belong to God. This is what I know about you. You belong to God. And as you grasp that, and as you allow that to sink in and to become who you are, that begins to affect your behavior. In other words, you no longer justify, oh, I'm just, doing this and it's okay because, that's what we do, is we justify our own behavior. But God really wants you to be set apart. He really wants you, like He really wants me, to be holy. Not to follow some strict set of rules. To say, God, your love leads me to holiness. Isn't that beautiful? And when God's love and you belonging in Him changes your behavior, we become the church. Oh, it's beautiful. That makes me want to sing and dance. I'm not going to do the dancing part for you because that would be embarrassing. But we're going to sing together. Before we do, I want to give you some homework. Last week's homework was cakewalk compared to this, right? Some homework for next week that I believe is going to help us to love the church. First of all, remind yourself every day this week that you belong to God. Can you do that? Remind yourself that you belong to God. I belong to God. If that's where you are, remind yourself every day this week, I belong to God. I believe that when you feel that belonging, it's going to change your behavior. And then secondly, take a 24-hour period. I'm not asking you to do nothing, okay? I don't have that time. I know, none of us do. Take a 24-hour period, and during that time, everything you do, celebrate God. Dedicate it to God. Everything that you do, when you do that, that's difficult. This is dedicated to God. And don't just say it real quick, just believe it and make it influence the decisions that you make about your life. Everything you do for 24 hours this week, dedicate it back to God. Let's stand together. And I just want to pray for you. We sing some more. But this is a hard, this is kind of a difficult conversation, right? It's hard for me. Now everybody's going to go, that's not very holy.